Mao-Zedong was born in 1893 and died in 1976. He was a Chinese revolutionary and a communist leader. In 1923, Mao, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Kuomintang, or GMD, temporarily merged parties. Even though the communists held no respect for the Kuomintang or their leader, Mao was willing to form temporary alliances which would help him achieve his long-term goals. In 1927, the merge split due to different views on Soviet interests that Mao and Chiang held. Mao then formed the Red Army, and his followers elected him as the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. After World War II ended, Mao's army defeated Chiang's army, and Chiang thus retreated. Mao was then declared the People's Republic of China and accepted the election of chairman on October 20, 1949. From there on, Mao ruled with an iron fist. He executed all that opposed his ideas. He attempted to show the joys and advantages of being communist. He also wanted to change the agrarian society that is China into a modern communist society instead. He wanted to do that through agriculturalizing, industrializing, and collectivizing. Mao proposed two main 5-year plans to change China. This, along with the Cultural Revolution, changed China forever. Mao's vision for China was to transform China into a strong, prosperous, independent, modern, industrialist, socialist state by combining effective leadership with participation by the people. In some ways, he achieved that.
The first 5-year plan ran from 1953 to 1957. It was based on a Soviet model for economic and industrial expansion and marked a shift in focus away from the peasants toward urban industrial projects. The greatest increases were in steel and coal, with steel production beating expected targets. Steel production grew from 1.3 million tons in 1952 to 5.2 million tons in 1957. The first 5-year plan significantly shaped life in industrial urban centers. Quality of life improved, indicated by significant increases in life expectancy, housing, and income. However, everyday life was also strictly controlled through the Danwei, which was the Chinese work unit. The Danwei provided the basic structure for labor and controlled many aspects of everyday life, including accommodation, education, and social services. State ownership dramatically expanded during this period so that most enterprises, food distribution, and land all came under centralized government control. This had adverse effects on rural areas, with grain production not keeping pace with industrial and population growth. The first cracks appeared towards the end of the first 5-year plan, as the increasing demand to feed an expanding urban population intensified criticism and opposition to rural collectivization. By the end of the first 5-year plan, about 93.5% of farm households had been collectivized, an outcome, according to Mao Zedong, that would solve the problems of the rural world. While government rhetoric and propaganda heralded the first 5-year plan as a success, the burdens felt in the countryside quickly approached breaking point. Mao's ambitious plans for further industrial growth would soon give rise to the looming disaster known as the Great Leap Forward.
The Great Leap Forward took place in 1958. It was Mao's attempt to modernize China's economy so that by 1988, China would have an economy that rivaled America. As Mao toured China, he concluded the capabilities of the people were great and the two primary tasks they should focus on were industry and agriculture. Upon deciding this, Mao announced a second 5-year plan to last from 1958 to 1963. This was known as the Great Leap Forward. He planned to develop industry and agriculture. He believed that for one to grow, the other had to grow. Industry could only prosper if the workforce was well fed, while the agricultural workers needed industry to produce the tools in order to modernize. To allow this, China was reformed into a series of communes. People gave up personal belongings to the commune. They now worked for the commune and not themselves. The commune provided all that was needed. By the end of 1958, 700 million people had been placed into 26,578 communes. The figures for steel, coal, chemicals, timber, cement all showed huge rises. Grain and cotton also showed major increases. Although the first year was successful, in 1959 things started to go wrong. People's decisions and beliefs took precedence over common sense, and communes were faced with the task of doing the impossible. commune leaders spoke against these requirements, they would face jail time. Machinery started to break down, and thousands of workers were injured. Steel was often too weak to be of use, and buildings constructed by the steel did not last long. The harvests in the following years continually decreased, well below what the population needed to suffice. The number of deaths as a result is tough to determine. The range goes from upwards of 30 million people to 55 million. The Great Leap Forward was a failure, and as a result, Mao had to resign from his position as head of state, though he remained powerful. During the 1961 through 1965 readjustment and recovery period, economic stability was restored, and by 1966, production in both agriculture and industry surpassed the peak levels of the Great Leap Forward period. Between 1961 and 1966, agricultural output grew at an average rate of 9.6% a year. Industrial output was increased in the same years at an average annual rate of 10.6%, largely by reviving plants that had operated below capacity after the economic collapse in 1961. Another important source of growth in this period was the spread of rural, small-scale industries, particularly coal mines, hydroelectric plants, chemical fertilizer plants, and agricultural machinery plants. The economic model that emerged in this period combined elements of the highly centralized, industrial-oriented Soviet-style system of the first five-year plan with aspects of the decentralization of ownership and decision-making that characterized the Great Leap Forward, and with a strong emphasis on agricultural development and balanced growth of the agriculture first policy. Important changes in economic policy occurred in later years. The basic system of ownership, decision-making structure, and development strategy that was forged in the early 1960s was not significantly altered until the reform period of the 1980s. Mao-Zedong, along with his followers, attempted to change China, and they succeeded in doing so forever. Mao's first five-year plan was utilized to increase the industrial and agricultural output of the People's Republic of China. In other words, it was used to improve the economic status of China. The purpose of Mao's second five-year plan was still to increase industrial and agricultural output, but was not a very big success. It lowered the average age of people dying, and it caused a great deal of famine and death. The second five-year plan did not go at all as planned, and China's state was not very good at the time. Immediately after the second five-year plan, Mao initiated the Agriculture First period, or the Readjustment and Recovery period. This period was quite successful as production in both industry and agriculture surpassed peak levels of the Great Leap Forward. Mao's intention of changing China was fulfilled, but the consequences were immense. The aftermath of his plans and his revolution continued to change China long after his death. Whether the effects were positive or negative, Mao definitely changed China forever.
From all of us here at Mac Productions, thank you, and see you next time.